I'm going to do a response to the critical drinker, which is quite weird because I haven't done video responses in ages. Reminds me of the good old days of YouTube. But he does do a lot of good reviews that if you haven't subscribed to his channel, you should. But when it comes to Star Trek Picard, I'm thinking like he just hates it because it's popular to hate it. He asks certain questions that are easily respondable. Now, there are a lot of flaws that he points out, and the flaws are accurate, but then there's also so much stuff that he brings up, and it's not a problem. Like, you can answer that stuff from within the logical framework of the universe. And you're going to see what I mean. Now, his review is 20 minutes long, and I'm not going to go through all of it, because then this video would be an hour long, and I don't think anyone wants to watch something like that. So I'll just go through the first 10 minutes of his initial review.
So let's begin this journey, shall we?
Engage.
Absolute Candor starts us off with yet another tedious flashback to the events of 14 years ago, because I guess we haven't seen this narrative clusterfuck from enough different points of view already. But for anyone who's not familiar with the series, basically the Romulan home planet was about to blow up, so the Federation launched a big rescue effort spearheaded by Picard, but then some assholes destroyed their shipyards, so they called the whole thing off and a lot of Romulans died. Anyway, this time we're on a Romulan refugee planet, where survivors are being resettled while the evacuation continues. And for some reason, it's a delightful looking place with solid, well-established buildings and infrastructure, clean water, plentiful food supplies, and a happy and prosperous population. And I couldn't help but think, what the fuck is going on here? This looks more like a tourism commercial than a refugee camp.
We're talking about a place the size of a planet, and Picard is visiting just a small location, which happens to be a monastery, so I assume it's secluded than the rest of the cities where you would see that doom and gloom that you're speaking of. At the monastery is just one single kid that happens to be a refugee, but we do not know the situation of the other people there. And Picard is there in order to negotiate with the people at the monastery and coordinate rescue efforts. And at this point in time, it's even before the calamity, so it's even before the sun went supernova, and the big bulk of refugees haven't arrived yet. Now, I don't know if you've actually been to a refugee camp, but it's not always doom and gloom. People still are cheerful, and they still go on with their daily lives. That doesn't mean that they're going to be always depressed and always in mourning and always saddened about their situation. They're trying to cope with it and move on. A more accurate criticism here is that later on, when Picard visits the planet again, he is told that he's got 5 more minutes before they're going to teleport him aboard the ship. And he uses those 5 minutes to do a Usain Bolt from the monastery all the way down to the town, and start some trouble there for no apparent reason whatsoever. Now, that is a criticism that I would full-heartedly accept. But to simply complain that this little spot is representative of the planet as a whole, and you're not happy that the people aren't miserable enough to your liking, is something that I find nitpicking and honestly just senseless criticism. And also the complaint about the fresh food supplies and the fresh water. The people on this planet have been there for quite a while. They're outside of the supernova, and the relocation of refugees are from the planets that are going to be blown up to this new particular place. But even then, you have to take into account that this is Star Trek. Like, they have access to replicators where they can produce fresh water and fruits and vegetables. And even then, if that wouldn't be the case, they have the whole universe at their hands. So if they were miserable and with dirty water and without food, you'd probably complain that why didn't they choose a planet that was a lot more livable? I'm pretty sure that you would complain that why aren't they using the replicator technology? I don't think you would have been happy with it either way.
Why does everyone look so comfortable and relaxed? Jesus, Picard even shows up looking like the man from Del Monte.
Knows that moment. The man from Del Monte says yes.
And yeah, I know Dave Cullen got there first with that joke, but shut up, I came up with it independently, so I'm keeping it in there. Anyway, the whole thing seems totally at odds with the events as I understand them. The evacuation of the Romulan homeworld was supposed to be a desperate race against time to save as many people as possible before their sun exploded. These refugees should be frightened, confused, and desperate for news about friends and family back home. Picard should be exhausted and worn out, devoting every waking moment to organising the rescue efforts. But the script is like, nah, it'll be fine.
Now, while the show could spend more time explaining the actual situation, and granted that I do hate the whole Kelvin timeline with the supernova, we do know that this action takes place before the star exploded. And we do not get any mention that the people there are actual refugees. The only person that we know is a refugee is the little kid in the monastery. But let's assume for the sake of the argument that literally everyone there is a refugee. Just because they do not have their Pikachu face when Captain Picard arrives doesn't mean that they're not concerned with what happened with their homeworld. I mean, I can be worried and concerned about something while still going on with my daily lives. Putting on a straight face is also something you do in order not to spread panic. If everyone was like, oh my, the sky is falling, that would just get everyone depressed and it wouldn't help with the situation anyway. As for Picard being professional, he is there in order to negotiate rescue operations with the leaders of the Romulan church. If Picard was acting all tired and beaten up, you would probably complain that why is he being so unprofessional? And furthermore, let's not forget that this is Star Trek, so the voyage between planets can take days if not weeks, meaning that Picard had ample time to rest. And this is his job. He's a diplomat. He handles these situations constantly throughout the Next Generation, and we never see him actually getting tired or be acting unprofessional. So no, I disregard this type of criticism, which again is just nitpicking. It's like, why is Picard so joyful? I don't know, maybe he's happy that he finally got up his ship, which he spends a lot of time on, and now he can finally just rest and relax a little bit with other faces that don't happen to be his crew.
Why depict a realistic refugee situation when you can contrast this cheerful place with the godforsaken dump it turns into in the present day for some really clunky and manipulative storytelling later in the episode? So Picard chats with the leader of the fuck it. A bunch of warrior nuns who run the place. Yep, that's the thing now. The Romulans have a society of warrior nuns because the plot of this episode needed to happen.
I actually happen to find the campiness of the warrior nuns a breath of fresh air. I mean, throughout the Next Generation you find a lot of crazy alien cultures with similar things. And considering that Picard likes to treat all the alien species as if they're humans, this was definitely exciting to see. I mean, his pet Romulans that he keeps on the plantation that he has are just 100% acting like humans. They even speak with an Irish accent. They do not do anything that would be considered alien. And this is where I complain that Star Trek has removed the quote-unquote racism from it. And what I mean by this is that every race used to have certain characteristics. The Klingons were traditionalists and they were prone to violence, and then you had the Vulcans that were driven by logic and they tried to suppress their emotions. This created a lot of drama when all of these different races and species had to work together in order to achieve a common goal. And seeing these warrior nuns part of Romulan culture, basically exposing their emotions, being like reverse Vulcans, always talking and focusing on their emotions, was a little bit more interesting. I found it interesting that they were constantly attacking and bullying that little kid, talking as if he wasn't there, and then you find out that the reason they were doing that is because they were just the opposite of Vulcans. They would talk about everything that they feel, and I really like that.
He also plays at sword fighting with a young orphan boy who's living with them and becomes a kind of surrogate father to him. Never mind though, I'm sure that won't be relevant later in the episode. But then, oh no, Picard gets a phone call saying that Mars has been blown up by the androids. Sorry, synthetics.
I prefer the term artificial person myself.
I'll get it right one day, don't you worry. And the rescue mission has been called off, so Picard gets sad and leaves to sort everything out. Then he disappears for 14 years. Did his watch stop? Or did he realise he was never going to get any action from the warrior nuns and bailed out to bag himself a sweet Irish Romulan housekeeper instead?
And this is where he actually starts getting really disingenuous with his criticism, because up until now, maybe you could have made the argument that, okay, you know, the refugees aren't as gloomy and upset as I wish them to be. But here, you can't make this criticism if you actually follow the plot. We know that once Picard left, he went to Earth, where he gave Starfleet his ultimatum of either you do the rescue operation or I resign. And he has to resign because they will not do the rescue operation. And when he resigns, he loses his ability to own ships. And there's an entire episode where he tries to find a ship that will take him to the place where he wants to, signaling that civilians, and yes, even admirals that renowned Starfleet, do not have a means of transportation through planets. So, for 14 years, he was stuck on Earth. So yes, he couldn't visit the warrior nuns. Now, let's assume, for the sake of the argument, that he would have visited the warrior nuns. Then I bet you'd have complained, and you said, oh, look, that's a plot hole, because how did he visit the warrior nuns in the first place if he didn't have a ship? And why is he looking for a ship now and not using the same way of transportation that he used in order to visit previously?
Cheeky fuckers.
Perhaps we shall never know the full truth. Flash forward to the present day, and Picard and the gang are in a race against time to rescue diverse female character before those crazy Romulans find and kill her. They're on a ship belonging to a roguish male captain who doesn't actually have a crew, but rather a bunch of holograms that he just kind of activates whenever they're needed. And for some reason, they all look exactly like him, which kind of made me wonder, if you're on your own and you've got the ability to create a customized hologram in any form, why not choose something a little more aesthetically pleasing?
Because he's into social justice and he's a sex-negative cock. I don't know, but the holograms is just one, and is the emergency medical hologram that is a thing from Voyager. And I kind of like the idea of the hologram, because so far it's the only interesting thing compared to the crew that's made entirely out of humans, and there's really nothing interesting in that. Now, why the hologram looks like him, I agree that is something annoying. Maybe it shows that his character is a narcissist. Maybe it's going to be explored later on. Maybe he had a twin brother that died and the hologram reminds me of him. I don't know. But one thing is for sure, and this is an accurate criticism that a critical drinker makes, it is confusing for the viewer to distinguish between the hologram and the pilot. So that was something that they should have avoided, but I'm pretty sure they might explain it in a later episode, because it is indeed confusing.
Also, it looks kind of confusing visually when you've got multiple versions of the same character on screen at the same time, and you're not sure which is the real one. Anyway, there's also Rafi, the strong, diverse female character who lost her commission in Starfleet when Picard resigned because she was his assistant or something.
Isn't that logical?
Even though she totally didn't want to resign, and there's no reason to suggest her conduct or performance warranted such an action.
Seriously, you can't be this disingenuous. Either you're not watching the show, which is a possibility, or you are just milking these things in order to have reasons to complain. First of all, she didn't resign, she was fired. And she was fired because it's obvious there is a purge. Everyone associated with Picard and everyone that is for the rescue operation is being led out the door because it seems Starfleet has been infected with the Romulans. Now, that doesn't mean that I agree with the story or that I find it interesting or whatever. I generally do not like the idea of Starfleet being co-opted by the Romulans. However, this is the story. There is no plot hole. It makes sense that if these people do not like Picard, they would start to fire people associated with him, especially the second in command. Especially the person that was on his ship. and would try to fight tooth and nail for whatever Picard stood for. Maybe the critical drinker isn't part of any corporation. Maybe he doesn't understand how politics work. I don't know. But like, to me, this makes absolute and complete sense.
Whatever. The plot needed it to happen, I guess, so here she is. Rafi's still kinda pissed off at Picard, and she's vowed never to work with him again after what happened last time, which kind of makes me suspect she doesn't really understand the meaning of words. She and Picard are on this ship together, cooperating with each other, exchanging information, and completing tasks in order to progress towards a mutually beneficial end goal. Like, isn't that the very definition of working together? Oh, and brilliant female scientist is also there because, well, I guess the script will think of something later. But right now, she's just an annoying arsehole that babbles on about space being really big. What's a brilliant scientist you are. Also, it took me a while to realise this, but her eyes are disturbingly close together, and now that I've noticed it, I can't not see it. And because of this video, neither can you.
Fuck. It is true. But, okay, let's go back to Rafi, which is a character I really don't like, and I wish she was handed a red shirt, because she's just not interesting. I mean, 7 of 9 is interesting. The emergency medical hologram is interesting. The Romulan ninja warrior is interesting. Rafi is not interesting. The science chick is poorly written. Like, we're told she's smart, she never actually does something smart, so that is, you know, a criticism that I'm willing to give. But the fact that Rafi is on board of the ship, she just wants to get to another planet, and as it's established by the lore, civilians that aren't members of Starfleet have a lot of difficulty moving from one planet to another. So she hitches a ride. Now, you can say that it's just convenient writing that she happens to go to the same planet that Picard wants to go. But the fact that she is ass hurt because her boss went against the establishment and she got fired for it is understandable. I mean, imagine you're working at a company and the people that are higher up decides that your company needs to have a diversity officer. So your boss starts trash talking the people in charge and trash talking their decisions and says that if you do not fire this diversity officer, I'm going to resign. And then people end up firing your boss, chances are you're on the chopping block. Even if you didn't say anything, it's just implied because you are under him and work so closely with him that you might also have the same mindset. So it wouldn't be fair if you get fired as well and you might have a grudge against your boss because you had a really nice job going and everything was working well until he had to open his big fat mouth and talk against the people in charge.
Anyway, she keeps pestering roguish male captain while he's trying to read a book in peace. Jesus, she's like a fucking child whining for attention. Regardless, pay particular attention to this scene, dear viewer, because it's a perfect example of the amazing writing in this show. So roguish male captain is getting kind of impatient because she keeps interrupting him, and when she mentions that she used to do the same exact thing to another guy in her life, roguish male captain asks what he did about it. And she's like, nothing, because he was my father. Now, you might think this would be a good opportunity for our man here to fire back with a little quip or a passive-aggressive remark of some kind. Something along the lines of, well, I'm not your dad, so I don't have to put up with you. You know, something that would establish him as the kind of guy who's initially cold and dismissive towards strangers and who doesn't take shit from anyone, especially on the bridge of his own starship. I mean, the guy uses emergency holograms of himself instead of having an actual crew, which suggests to me that he's not very good around other people. Wouldn't a tense interaction like this be a good way to reinforce that idea? But nah, he just sits there in silence and waits for the next dumb question to come rolling in from not so brilliant female scientist. Now, I know this is just a tiny little example, but this failure to show initiative, take command of a conversation, or even just have a good bit of verbal sparring is something I keep noticing amongst the male characters in Picard. They're passive and submissive instead of being active and independent. They take insults and criticism, but they never give anything back, like they're afraid to open their mouths or something. Meanwhile, the women are all aggressive, assertive and domineering, and it just seems a little unbalanced. Anyway, on with whatever passes for a plot.
The real criticism here is that the science chick is something you get to see in comic books that are written by social justice activists a lot, and I'm so sick and tired of the self-insert, which is the very smart lady that is socially awkward. So she is the smartest ever. She never does anything smart though. Like everyone around them says, no, she's the best. She just can do anything. She's smart. But she never actually acts smart, or the only time that the writers want her to be smart, like the people around her have to act incredibly dumb. I like to call it the Sansa Stark way of retardation. So Sansa Stark, when she went into season 7, I believe, she had this aura of making people around her moronic, so that her by acting normal would look smart by comparison. Like, for example, she walks past a blacksmith, and she's like, oh, make sure you have some leather paddings because winter is coming and it's going to be, like the plate is going to frost if you do not do that. So it's like, okay, so this chick, which apparently is a lady, like she doesn't know blacksmithing for shit, is lecturing a blacksmith that has been doing that trade since he grew up, I guess. It is also giving him like bad information, like you do not put leather on plate. Like even how do you oil it and maintain it if you put leather on plate, right? So this is like the archetype science lady here. She is socially awkward. She never does anything smart. And my point with him like just ignoring her is like I would ignore her too. If I were to give her like the advice, the line you said, it's like, oh, I'm not your father, so I don't have to put up with you. I would risk having her give me another phrase, like the conversation would continue, which would be to the detrimental of my neurons, so I would also ignore her. However, you do have a point. Yes, in this show, and I've not noticed it until you pointed out, all the male characters do seem to be subservient. And there's even that scene with the evil Romulan guy and his sister, I guess. They're sitting in the bed, and the sister is just grabbing his neck from a very awkward position. Like, all he has to do is to just bitch slap her or push her away, or just... He can literally just walk. He can literally just get up and avoid that choke. But for some reason, he just sits there getting choked. And yeah, you are absolutely right with this criticism. The women are acting like men, and the men are acting like support characters. Like, it's not a show that's against the gender stereotype. They just reverse the gender stereotype, and they think that's, I guess, fighting against gender stereotypes. I don't know, they're still there, it's just on reverse.
So Rafi gets angry when she finds out that Picard is taking them on a detour to the planet from his flashback. And to be honest, I fully agree with her on this one. Why are you doing this, JL? You're supposed to be in a race against time to save diverse female character.
So I'll stop it here because I don't want this to get 1 hour long, and I think you guys kind of get the gist. But again, this is like some criticism that genuinely doesn't make sense. Like, Picard is not good at combat, and that was established when he found Daj and he couldn't protect her from the evil Romulans, the super mega secret police or whatever. And now he's getting someone that is actually good at fighting. He's actually getting a warrior, so that when he finds Daj's sister, if they do get into combat and he actually needs to Melissa Click get some muscle over here, he would have someone that would be able to act as a bodyguard. So, I do not understand these criticisms. Like, there is a lot to criticize in this show, but some of these nitpickings just have clear answers. Some of them aren't even plot holes. Most of them even make sense. So, I just wish that the Critical Drinker would step up his game a little bit so that I can enjoy his things again. Yeah, I mean, let me know what you think in the comment sections, like, especially people who actually watch the episodes. Tell me if I'm wrong or not, especially with the fact that it's like, why was she fired? Like, it makes sense that she got fired. It was a purge. They don't want people like Picard on Starfleet anymore. They want to reshape Starfleet so that they have an army of yes men and not people that complain. I thought that's like one of the core issues of the plot. You know, Starfleet being taken over by Romulans. And again, like, even if you do not like the plot, and I honestly don't, it still makes sense. You know, like, if a Romulan is there, yes, he's going to try to have more people on his side and less people like Picard. And her being her second in command, would definitely be on the chopping block of names. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you guys later.